Deci no 1971. He gave one group of college students a set of interesting puzzle problems to work on. He observed how long they voluntarily engaged with the puzzles during a free period when they could do anything they wanted. Then he introduced a monetary reward. Students would be paid for each puzzle they solved. After several sessions, he removed the payment. What he found was that the students who had been paid spent significantly less time with the puzzles during the free period after the reward was removed than they had before it was ever introduced. The students who were never paid showed the opposite pattern. Their interest remained stable or increased. The reward had not amplified their engagement with the material. It had shifted the perceived reason for doing it. And when the external reason disappeared, the internal one had been quietly crowded out. This effect was named the overjustification effect, and it has been replicated in hundreds of studies. The mechanism is rooted in how the brain attributes cause to its own behavior. When you do something and find it engaging, your brain registers the engagement as evidence of intrinsic interest. You're doing it because you like it. When external reward is introduced, it provides an alternative explanation. You're doing it because of the reward. The brain, seeking the simplest causal explanation for its own actions, shifts the attribution. The activity is no longer something you do because it is inherently interesting. It becomes something you do to get the thing outside of it. And when that external thing disappears, the question your brain now asks, consciously or not, is, why would I do this? The answer, in the absence of the reward, is less compelling than it used to be. Self-determination theory proposes that human beings have three core psychological needs that, when satisfied, reliably produce intrinsic motivation and sustained engagement. The need. There is a finding in psychology that most people encounter and immediately resist. It goes against common sense, against how most schools are run, against how most workplaces operate, and against the intuitions of almost every parent who has ever tried to get a child to do something. The finding is this: rewarding people for doing something they already enjoy tends to make them enjoy it less. Not sometimes, not in edge cases. Reliably, across dozens of experiments, across different cultures and age groups, across creative tasks and intellectual ones. The reward does not add motivation. It replaces the original motivation with something cheaper and less durable. And when the reward is removed, the behavior often disappears entirely, even though it was there freely and enthusiastically before the reward arrived. Understanding why this happens requires understanding how your brain categorizes different reasons for doing things, and why the category matters far more than the effort itself. Psychologists Edward Deci and Richard Ryan spent decades building what became one of the most influential theories in motivational science, self-determination theory. At its core, the theory draws a fundamental distinction between two types of motivation. Intrinsic motivation is doing something because the activity itself is rewarding, because it produces feelings of interest, enjoyment, mastery, or meaning. Extrinsic motivation is doing something because of a separable outcome, a reward, a grade, a salary, the avoidance of punishment, or the approval of someone else. This distinction sounds clean, but the reality it describes is messy and consequential. These two types of motivation do not simply add together when both are present. They interact in ways that can be either synergistic or corrosive, and understanding which one you are operating on at any moment is one of the more useful things you can know about yourself. The experiment that launched this field was conducted by, for autonomy, the need for competence, and a need for relatedness. Autonomy is the experience of acting from genuine choice, of feeling like the author of your own behavior rather than a pawn moved by external forces. Competence is the feeling of being effective, of meeting challenges that stretch your current abilities without overwhelming them. Relatedness is the experience of feeling genuinely connected to others, of mattering to people who matter to you. When these three needs are met, the research shows people demonstrate remarkable persistence, creativity, and psychological well-being. When they're chronically frustrated, people disengage, become passive, or seek short-term compensations that rarely satisfy the underlying need. The autonomy finding is perhaps the most counterintuitive and the most important. Research consistently shows that the single most damaging thing you can do to a person's intrinsic motivation is to make them feel controlled. This is true even when the control is well-intentioned, even when the outcome being controlled toward is genuinely good, and even when the person being controlled agrees intellectually that the behavior is worthwhile. What the brain registers is not the outcome, but the locus of causality, where the person perceives the reason for their action to originate. When a locus is internal, when you feel like you chose this, the activity feeds the sense of self. When the locus is external, when you feel like you're doing this because you were told to, paid to, or pressured to, that same activity can feel like an imposition, even if the underlying task itself is identical. This has direct implications for how we structure education, work, parenting, and behavior change. Environments that emphasize surveillance, evaluation, deadlines with threatening consequences, and competitive ranking tend to systematically undermine intrinsic motivation, even when the people being evaluated succeed by external measures. Grades can teach students to optimize for grades rather than for understanding. Performance bonuses can teach employees to perform for bonuses rather than for the work itself. Parental praise contingent on achievement can teach children that they are valued for their output rather than for who they are. Each of these systems produces a version of success that is real but narrower and more fragile than the one it displaced and less self-sustaining. Understanding self-determination theory changes how you interpret your own fluctuations in motivation. When you find yourself doing something you once loved, but feeling hollow or driven by anxiety, the question worth asking is not what is wrong with me, but what has changed about why I'm doing this. Has the external pressure grown so loud that your own voice in the activity has gone quiet? Is the reward system around this behavior making you feel evaluated rather than engaged? The goal is not to eliminate external structures. They are inevitable and sometimes necessary. It is to protect enough space for your own reasons to remain audible. Because the part of you that does things for its own reasons is not just more pleasant to live with. It is more creative, more persistent, more resilient to failure, and ultimately more effective under pressure than the part that does things because someone is watching. Subscribe if you want to keep going deeper. Every week, this channel goes one level further into the psychology, shaping what you do, why you do it, and how long you keep going.